Welcome to IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Don.
Coming at you live from San Francisco.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
All right, greetings everyone, and welcome back to another great episode of IT Pro TV. I'm your host, Daniel Lowry, and in today's episode, we are back with more in our A+ series, moving along, trying to finish that out for you guys so that you can get all schooled up, go pass an exam, get right out there in the field with their freshly minted certs. A lot of fun. Joining me back in the studio yet again to lend his expertise for us to help us out, our good friend, Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, how's it going today, man?
Yeah, it's going great. Now I'm going to think minted certs. Is that peppermint? Is that chocolate mint?
That's right.
Or is that fresh off the press?
Fresh off the press.
Fresh off.
That's right.
That's what we'll go for. Definitely. That's right. We're going to be moving through security today, and you know we've actually been in a couple episodes into security, and we're going to be focusing in on, well, you've probably seen the title already, but we'll go ahead and mention it anyways. Workstation security. And in a past episode, they talked about something. We talked about. I don't know who they are. That would have been us.
Yeah.
Talked about
those guys.
some of the concepts behind working or securing your workstations already, and that was about passwords, right? We talked about strong passwords, but we'll let you guys and gals out there go back and check out what strong passwords are when it comes down to it. As just a real quick recap, remember strong passwords, that's basically passwords that are resilient against password-based attacks. And again, we've also talked about those in other episodes. So again, we're not going to spend pretty much any time when it comes to the DNA of a strong password. Now, one of the things that you're going to want to understand is that they do mention that in the objectives. And in fact, Dan, let me go ahead and call out the objective here. This is 3.4, given a scenario, deploy, enforce security best practices to secure your workstations. And one of the very first things they talk about is requiring a password. So you really shouldn't have any machine within, within your office, if you will, within your corporate network, really even within your home, that doesn't require a password in order to get into it. In fact, I'll tell you, even from a parental standpoint, I require, my son, he's going in, he's going to be in middle school, and we require, even at the basic level, for him to have a password for his account on our, on my machine that we basically watch over him with. So keep in mind that when it comes to any kind of workstation, again, from the simplest home environment right up to a corporate network, you want to make sure that you at least require a password to get into the workstation. You just don't want to leave it wide open so that anybody can get into it anytime they want.
Funny thing, Wes, I was looking over the objectives for this little lovely thing we're doing here, and none of them said don't share your password. And to be honest with you, this is a big problem. People do that. They're like, oh, well, just log in under my account. It's easier because I got everything already set up. Here's my password, log in. Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I know you're trying to be nice, you're trying to make everything work really easily, but all you're doing is increasing your security attack platform, or your attack surface. That's all you're doing, because now they tell people, oh, well, you can log into so-and-so's machine, and next thing you know, the whole company or the whole house or whoever is logging in as you, and now no one, the whole purpose of being different, having your own account that has a password attached to it, is so that we can audit and we can keep things secure, that you have access to things that only you need to have access to, and people that don't need access to that don't have access to it. So if you're giving it out, that is a huge security flaw. So do not give out your password. No one's ever going to ask you for your password. They shouldn't be asking you for your password. So just keep your password close to the vest. That's probably one of the biggest things I've seen out in real life land.
And let's write a couple things down, unlike your password, right?
Yeah.
I want to write one thing down because I do want to come back to it. I'm glad you kind of addressed that issue, is every password should be unique. Nobody should have access to your password. I'm going to bookmark that. We're going to write that down because I do want to double back on it. But I also want to just expand on what you were saying, even though it's not in the objectives here. Dan, you've been on this journey with me throughout 902, and there are things that we are throwing in here that aren't necessarily going to show up on the exam, but you better believe that they're going to show up in the real world. And that's why we talk about in other episodes, especially related to security, we talk about things like, well, social engineering, right? Guessing. Guessing is something that, it implies a little bit of effort. There's no effort involved, right? If you write your password down, you stick it on the most secure place, a Post-it note, the most secure place in the world to put it, under the keyboard. Believe it or not, it happens a lot right there on the side of the monitor, right? The other thing, too, is we want to keep in mind, we talk about insecurity as we, go through security and continually introduce you to that CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right? Now, integrity, I'm going to kind of skip the C, we'll come back to it. Integrity, remember, is just making sure that the data doesn't change, isn't altered, whether intentionally, unintentionally, maliciously, non-maliciously, and what I mean by that is that, you know, network errors happen, hard drives fail, that's unintentional, doesn't necessarily have to be a malicious attack, or it could be some kind of attack, right? Availability is making sure that you have access to the resources that you're supposed to have access to, but keep in mind, we don't want to overshoot the runway on availability and for, you know, they basically ruin confidentiality because of the things that we try to make super convenient so we don't have to remember passwords, right? Confidentiality is making sure that only the authorized users have access to the data. You say, well, wait a second, Wes, we're talking about workstations. What do you think you use your workstation for, right? You use your workstation as a part of an information system to gain access to the information that you and your company use, all right? So it is important to require those passwords. Strong passwords, like we said, is making sure that they are resilient against password attacks. Now, I want to double back on something that Dan mentioned. It says every password should be unique and only you should know it, right? That's something that we actually employ inside of even a corporate environment, right? And what I mean by that is not sharing passwords. There's one password sometimes that we share. Let me show you what I mean here. In fact, I've got a server operating system here, and I believe I have a server operating system here. There we go. It says it's there. You know, sometimes they give you the screenshot and you can't tell whether you're logged in or not. So it looks like I am still logged in here. And ladies and gentlemen, remember that we talked about in other episodes, we talked about a Windows domain, we talked about network setup. Remember, I get centralized administration and I can manage my users from here. All right, well, as administrators, even administrators shouldn't have your passwords, right? That is a definite no-no, right? Why? Well, because as administrators, you can reset passwords. Like if I had a user here, let's say user, and I got an example of one, user student 01, calls up the help desk, says, Dan, I need access to my account. I've lost my password. Dan says, okay, did you file out your password, you know, reset paperwork so that we can get it authorized and I can go? Because you don't just make changes to corporate-based equipment without some kind of authorization. Let's say that happens, right? Well, notice that Dan can come in here, right-click on that user account and reset the password to something that he knows. So administrators don't need your password because as administrators, if we really want access to your account, maliciously or non-maliciously, we can gain access to it, but just by resetting your password, something that we know.
Have had to do it, actually. And then what we can do after we're done is we just reset the password to something that we can tell you and then have you change it at your first login.
And let's go ahead and do exactly that. That's where I was going. Looks like you have done this once or twice. That's right. You've been on that boat before. So let me show you exactly what he means, right? So if I'm going to create, let's say a new user, right? And I'm not going to be too creative here. I'm just going to create a new user. Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to worry about doing this on the exam. I just want you to see what we're talking about here. All right, so user is going to be student 02. Oops, 92 apparently. Student 02.
Got a good-sized class there, Wes.
That's right. We got a big class here. Student and 02 again. So that's going to be the user's logon name, student 02. We're going to choose next. Now, I want you to pay attention. Remember Dan said we can just require them to change this password at the next login? Well, notice here, user must change password at the next login. So this gives me a chance to set, if I wanted, a generic password, and we'll see if I can actually type that password twice the same, you know, the same password. All right, and what I can do is that I can say next, choose finish. It looks like I did type it right. And now what happens is when a person logs into a machine, it requires them to reset the password. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to pick on Dan. We've been picking on Dan's account throughout this 902 series. It's been working out good. Why stop a good thing?
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
So I'm going to
go broke, right?
Right. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to log into the domain on a Windows 8.1 machine, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to log in as Dan. All right. Now, when I do this,
Wes, how do you know my password?
That's right.
See, he changed it.
You wrote it down.
Yeah, I did.
You
put it
wrote
underneath my keyboard. Bad idea, by the way.
So we'll
you want to put it on
ahead.
your monitor.
That's right. We'll go ahead, and what we're going to do is we'll try to sign in as Dan. All right, now, looks like that didn't work. Okay, so let me try one more time. All right, so looks like I didn't reset the password, but let me go ahead. I'll tell you what, we'll log in as student 02. What I was trying to do is save the time that it takes for Windows to build a profile, but we'll go ahead and just do this, and this would really be no different than if your user was logging in for the first time. Again, I was going to try to save us a little time on camera here. and we'll go ahead and we'll log in. All right, now notice what the authentication screen is telling me. It's telling me right here that I need to change the password before I log in, right? So this gives Dan, as an administrator, all right, and like you said, he's done it on many occasions, the ability to set a generic password. And that generic password might be a one-time password that's consistent throughout the environment. It might be something that changes daily. Okay, today we're going to use this password for any onboarding employees coming into your company, but then we're going to change it the next day. Because one of the things that can be that can become a workstation security problem as well. If they know that you're onboarding new employees, well, I can log in as a new employee because I already know what the generic password is. So that might be something that changes. But notice that the user has to change the password, right? And I'll go ahead and I'll set. Let's see, what password do I want? We'll use a super ultra safe generic password of, well, password. All right. Now, we'll get a little bit more into this. Understand that with passwords, again, you want to implement things like password complexity, and that is something that essentially you can do inside of your password policies. You also want to set up things like password expiration. All right. Now, we talked a little bit about that in another episode, but I do want to kind of show you what would happen if a password truly does expire. So we're going to go ahead, and what we're going to do is while this machine is getting logged in and it's building that user profile, all right, what we're going to go ahead and do is, well, try to log in again. There we go. Wake the machine up here. And what I got is I got a screensaver on, and it's set to a blank screen here in a server. All right, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to force these computers to require a password to expire. All right, and that'll be important for us. All right, so what we'll do is we'll go ahead, and I think what we'll do is, let's go to, I tell you what, we'll go to group policy here. And you always have password policies that are set within a corporate environment in something known as a domain. And it is important to have that because we want to have that workstation security. So I'll go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive down into our security policies. All right, GPO is more appropriately named. Expand out Windows settings. And again, like I said, ladies and gentlemen, understand the concepts behind this. You don't have to worry about actually configuring things like your security settings inside of a domain environment. We just want to show you that when they say password expiration, exactly what they mean. All right, and we look at local policies. Notice we have password policies. All right, now in a domain, you can see that the password age says 42 days. All right, and what that means is in 42 days, you're going to have to change your password. It's going to be required. All right, now I can actually force this to happen if I want, right? I can say, you know what, I'm going to change the maximum password age, and we'll see if we can kind of fake the computer here just to simulate what you guys might see. And it's also giving me some recommendations because my minimum password age is 1 day too, so they kind of conflict. Don't worry about that. But I do want to change this down to a minimum of 1 day. And let me see also. If we can, we're going to kind of fool this machine into thinking that it's later than what it is. I'm going to change the date and time here. And again, you guys can kind of see how you could really test this out in your own lab. We'll go ahead, and it looks like I did change the day there. And just double check one more time and make sure that that did change. All right, and yes, okay, so that did change. That's what we want. All right, now this machine, I'm going to also change the date and time. Again, we're just going to force it here to think that it is after the expiration date, if you will, in the password policy. All right, so we'll go ahead. We'll log in or authenticate as our administrator. Hopefully we can make this work. And we'll change the date and time. We'll choose OK. And let me go ahead and what I'm going to do, we've talked about in our commands, right? We've talked about some commands that allow us to update policies. We talked about something known as GP update. And remember, we said that that's to update group policy. Like I said, I don't believe that they're going to talk too much or expect too much on the exam about group policy. But they do mention in the objectives knowing that command, so it is good to just have a little bit of information about group policy in general. Remember, it's just the way that we apply configuration settings like the passwords that we're talking about here in this episode. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and we are going to update the policy. And what should happen is it should reach out to that computer that we just set the password policy on, and it should pull that policy down, and it should apply any of the settings that it seems that has been changed on this machine. All right, now it does look like the computer policy has updated successfully, so that's good. And we'll go ahead, and what we're going to do is we'll do a shutdown here real quick. We've also talked about this command in another episode as well. So if you're not familiar with the shutdown command, we're going to go ahead. We're just going to restart this machine. And I always do this because I've seen in the past, computers, got to love them, right? I've seen in the past where you actually update a policy and you do exactly what we've done. And Dan, I know you probably have to deal with this more often than not, or more times than you want to, where even though you did update it, it gave you a hard time, right?
Yeah,
it does look like in the background too it's going to do some updates, so hopefully this doesn't take too long.
Yeah, some group policies require an update or a restart. A log out just won't do. Even though some of them say all you need to do is a log out or a forced update to it. Just try to do it normally, but if not, be prepared to do a restart.
Yeah, and that's essentially what we're doing here. We got a restart happening, and what we'll do is we're going to turn around and we're going to log back in as the student that we just basically logged in as here on the machine. And hopefully, if everything's gone all right, if we've worked our magic here and kind of tricked it a little bit, it should hopefully believe that it is a later date than what that password policy said before. But again, we'll see. Oh, no, it seems like it did not take it here. Let's try that one more time. Oh, and you know what? I bet it didn't do that because of the fact that that computer was, or that account was just created, so it might still be within its time limit there. So give me 1 second. Let's sign out. Let's try another. Let's try another machine here real quick, or another account, excuse me. We'll pick on Dan again.
Yeah.
We'll do Dan here, Dan's account, and now I got to see if I can remember good old
my
Dan's
password.
Nope, that's not the password. We got a few of them here that I've tried. And that's one of the things, when you start changing passwords on camera here, you got to remember which one was the password.
Actually brings up a
good...
good...
Okay.
Actually brings up a good policy is lockout. How many times can someone attempt to log in before they get, your account has been disabled because of too many login attempts? That's also a good password policy to set inside of any environment.
Sure, and now it's picking up on the fact that I actually required your password to be changed, but but understand that this isn't the expiration that I was wanting. You'll see maybe Student 01, because Student 01 hasn't logged in. And I also created that account beforehand, so let's see if I can get Student 01 machine. Nope, we'll try this one more time. Hold on, wait for it. Try to get this machine to, it says say 1 day. It does look like, I tell you what, we'll go ahead and we'll go even more so here. We'll do a GP update on this side too. Not that it really should matter on the domain controller here. Do a GP update. A little troubleshooting here right on camera. And then the worst case scenario, we can always restart the server here as well too. And again, keep in mind that the whole point of showing this is that the passwords should expire, right? You want them to do some kind of expiration within a certain time frame, and why? Well, if you have non-expiring passwords, the problem is it gives hackers all the time they need to run things like password cracking utilities. If they can make their way into your network and gather your user database, right, your users, where the user's passwords are stored and the passwords never change, then what they can do is they can take that and they can run that through some of the password cracking utilities and just sit there and try to break the passwords. And if your passwords do change, then what happens is, yeah, they might crack the password that maybe they've scraped and they've gained a hold of, but if the password's already changed, well, then guess what? It doesn't matter that they've cracked. What they've done is actually cracked an earlier or older password here. All right, so we're going to try this again one more time. I could probably do this in the background here.
So I was just looking up the amount of time it would take to crack an 8-character password, and it looks like at about 1 billion passwords a second, that being your speed, you can crack an 8-character password composed of using about 96 characters, takes about 83.5 days.
Wow.
So now you start to see the importance of putting time limits and expiration dates on your password. If I make it, password never expires, well, in about 83.5 days, if someone were to be able to grab that hashed value for a password, in about 83 and a half days, they very well may have that password in hand and able to log in. So that's why you see by default Windows sets it at 42 or 43 days. Yeah, that's good, right? And how long does it go if it becomes 9 characters? So as you increase the complexity or the length, it starts creating a longer time. That's a brute force attack to go through each permutation. You also have to worry about dictionary attacks as well, but you take those both into account, doing these things as you stack them together, setting expiration dates, setting logouts, or not logouts, where you've had too many login attempts and it disables an account. You start putting these things together, it creates a really robust offense against password attacks.
Most definitely. In fact, now that the dates, my head's kind of covering it up, you can see this thought bubble here that's kind of come up, and it's letting me know that there's something wrong with the credentials. It needs your current credentials. So we're going to try this one more time. We're going to log out as this user. Let me see real quick. I can't remember which user I'm logged in as. All right, so let's log out as this user. And we'll try to log in as a couple other the users that I've created here inside of our system. I'll try to do that student 01 or student 02 again. It looks like it wasn't quite within the full 1 day there, so that very well could have been the problem. Nope, that's not. That certainly it doesn't seem to be the problem here. But again, we'll try it one more time, and if not, we'll see what happens here. Again, what should happen is when you are signing in and signing out. Oh, and this might be a computer policy. I never even thought about that, Dan. It might still have an old GPO. I might actually have to run the GP update here on it and update that password or the GPO policy. Let's try this.
Your domain is incorrectly spelled.
Oh, yeah.
Don't want to try to log into Demio.
Not exactly sure what that is, but yeah, that's right.
We don't have rights to that there domain, do we,
okay.
Wes?
Here's what I was trying to. It took a little
there
bit, but
is.
we finally got it, right? Notice the difference here, because I didn't want to say, oh, yeah, notice Dan's password had to change. Well, that's actually a setting that you can do inside to make sure that the password's always unique. But this is what I wanted to show you here. Took a little bit to get there, but notice that it says the password has expired and it must be changed. Now, there's another thing I want you to keep in mind, and I'll kind of show you the password here in the background. All right. We also want to make sure that we have password history enforced too. Let me see here if I can change it to, see which of the variations of the password that I've tried. All right, so let's go ahead and let's try to set it to the same password. And let's see what happens. Okay, this is what I wanted to show you. Notice it says unable to update the password. The value provided for the new password does not meet the length, complexity, or history requirements of the domain. All right, now remember that one of the things Dan said is you're kind of stair stacking different components within a policy together, right? You're not only changing it every 42 days, but there are other things, the complexity, the length, if you will, the character sets, in this case, the history. I can't turn around and change the password right to the same password because essentially that's really not changing it, right? Doesn't really help you. No. So let's go ahead and let's try this again. I might have already set this password a couple of times to the same values, right? So let me use another variation of the default passwords that I use and see if that works. And again, that's one. Same thing is happening here, right? So again, what you have to do is you have to make sure that the password in this case is unique. It can't be the same thing, obviously, and it can't be something that you've used in however many the history is. In this case, the domain policy says you have to use 24 unique passwords before you can ever recycle a password, essentially.
Well, Wes, how come I can't just change my password 24 times and then I'm back to my original password and jump right back on the train, right?
That's a great question. One of the reasons you can't do that is something known as the minimum password age. And the minimum password age was that one that kind of got went a little haywire on us. And that says you have to use your password for a minimum of 1 day. All right, now where does that come into play for us? Well, just like Dan said, if it's got 24 that you need to use uniquely, what stops me from just 24 times changing my password? Well, if you have to use your password for a minimum of 1 day, it means it's going to take me 24 days before I can ever reuse a password because I could change it, then I have to use it a day. Then I can change it again, and I have to use it a day. So I'll have to use it 24 days. So that's one of the great things. And again, I'm glad you brought it up because of the fact that it is a combination of things, right? Not just one thing that helps to secure our workstations and our password best practices, right? Now, the other thing that I kind of want to show in here, and I know we're kind of running to the end on this one because we got a couple of cool more cool things that we kind of want to show you that you can do and you can require. I've been doing this from a domain standpoint, right? I'm actually taking another computer that's pushing out these settings and applying it to this machine. I also want you, ladies and gentlemen, to know that if you have a professional or business edition of Windows, you can also do this yourself. All you have to do is drop down, in this case, to the modern UI, Windows 7, the search functionality, or the run line will do this as well. And you can actually type in gpedit .Mike Sierra Charlie there, or .msc here, and you can launch the local group policy editor. I don't have the permissions. I'm in as a standard user, but you can also do these same exact settings right here from the local group policy as well. All right, now let's go ahead. Oh, and notice how it's also giving me this warning. It says, consider changing your password. Remember, I put the password expiration down to 1 day. So it's kind of interesting because I just changed the password. It says, your password expires today. You might want to consider changing it. So you do get a warning in this situation. You're not going to just be, unless you don't pay attention, you will get a warning that says, hey, it's been 42 days, or in this case, it'll be 41 days. You've got 1 day left to use this password, and you need to consider changing it. I want to let you guys and gals know out there, if you're in a remote environment and you're using remote desktop to connect into your machine, and you don't change that, you won't be able to change it locally. You can't change the password over the remote connection. So what will happen is your password will expire, and then you won't be able to get back into your machine from a home environment. You'll be calling, like the administrator, like Dan, and saying, hey, Dan, I can't get into my machine. Can you reset it? So make sure that you do reset it in time, especially for those of you that work from home and actually connect over like the internet back into your work network. All right, so let me go ahead and one last thing here that I want to show. We'll probably have to go into a part 2, but let me go ahead and sign out a little crippled here in what I can do as a standard user. And I don't like having my wings clipped. That's just the power trip in me. So let me go ahead and I will log back in as the administrator. And it's going to tell me my password needs to be changed. Oh, Dan, why did you let me do that? Why didn't you talk some sense into me, sir? All right. Let's go ahead and type that again, because apparently I did not do that right, which means one of these is wrong. There we go. Let's try that. All right, there we go. Password's been changed, and now we're logging into the administrator as the administrator. And one of the last things I wanted to show you here, at least in this first part, as we talk about password best practices, is really just right-clicking on the Windows tile, going to the control panel, and then we're going to go to Appearance and Personalization. All right, so keep that in mind. And once we get into Appearance and Personalization, we're going to go to the Personalization. I could use, let me kind of back up, because I could use this change screensaver option as well. And if I choose change screensaver, right, it takes me to the location that I want to be as well. And then if I change to, let's say I change to 3D text, right, and I change my screensaver, you might say, well,
that takes me back right there.
It does, right? Yeah, you got to watch it when you're bored, right? How fast, it's so funny, these used to be so slow. Right, in the settings, they used to be so slow because we didn't have a lot of processing power today, and now
you can give yourself like motion sickness.
Yeah, absolutely, you have to take some Dramamine. You hope, or you hope that your screensaver doesn't kick in, right? Well, you might say, well, wait a second, Wes. Screensavers, I thought we really didn't have to worry about the burn-in effect anymore on these LED and LCD screens, and the truth is, you really don't have to worry about it. But this is a security setting, and what I mean by that is notice that it says on resume, display the login screen. That's something that we want, right? Now, in Windows, you have what's known as the Windows key L, and you should always be using it. That locks your machine, right? Windows key L locks my machine. When I walk away from it, I have an authentication screen or a login dialog box. I have to log it back into the machine. However, there are times when you're like, oh, I got a call, got to take the call. You walk away from your machine. Well, remember one of the things that Dan mentioned, if you have a password written down and you leave yourself logged in, it's no different than writing your password down, right? Everybody can get into your machine, and there is no way for a machine to tell that it isn't you once you're authenticated. When you're logged in, you lose what's known as, it's essentially non-repudiation, right? I can't sit there and say, no, that wasn't me that did that. That was Dan. Dan come over here. He put the black hat on, right? And he sat down at my computer and he sent out those emails to the boss that says, I hate my job. He can go stuff it, right? Well, there's really no way that anybody could prove that because you've left yourself logged in. And this is kind of like a security for yourself as well. It says if I walk away from my computer and I forget to lock it, right, at least it'll lock for me. And then when the computer comes back from the screensaver, what will end up happening is it will require you to authenticate, and then you can change it there. So last little thing here, Dan, and you know, I know we only got through the first part here. We do have to look at some other things, additional things that you have to do inside of account management, but it looks like we're going to have to go into a part 2 to take care of those.
No problemo, sir. I'm looking forward to it. We do thank you, Wes, for stopping by and lending your expertise on this. It's been a lot of fun, and passwords are obviously a very good place to build up strength when it comes to security inside of your network. It can also be a real point of weakness. So we have to really approach it with the mindset of that layered defense, using all the tools at our disposal to really harden that point of contact up with our attack vector. So that being said, we are out of time for this episode. We will be back for a part 2 with a little more on security. So join us then. As for this episode, it's time to sign off. For IT Pro TV, I've been your host, Daniel Lowry.
And I'm Wes Bryan.
And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.